And in my experience, there's a section of this book, the first 84 pages, I think, 88 pages are essentially how it works, how the program front to back works. Yeah. You can find this online too for free if you ever want to read it through. But once they hit page 60, they start referencing step 4, which is a fearless moral inventory of your self, essentially your past, based on resentment. Yeah, so who I resent, why I resent them, and my part to play. So essentially, they're coming down to the exact what they would call the exact nature of the wrong. And on page 62, this paragraph had not stuck out to me this significantly as it has in the last week, but it starts like this: selfishness, self-centeredness with an exclamation mark. Selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some time in the past, we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. So selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Meaning that would be the starting point, yeah, of where things go off for the alcoholic. And then it says that we think is the root of our troubles, driven by 100 forms. That's a lot of forms of fear. Self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. So all of those start with the word self. Self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. There's another part in this book that really points something out. It says, even when we were being kind, was this not a form of self-seeking? Which is like a very illuminating statement, yeah. So this idea of self-centeredness being the root of our troubles, at least in my experience, both either in Buddhism, in Advaita, or in yoga, it's the root of the whole basis, yeah? There's a system or a movement which is self-centered, yeah? That would be the mental movement, is self-centered. Self-centeredness being the root of our problem. So a lot of movements in spiritual practice and in recovery, by the way, is an idea that system, I'm going to make it not self-centered, but it's a self-centered system. That's why it's called self-centered. It is centered on itself. Yeah. Essentially, you are always thinking about you, and when you're thinking about other people, it's in reference to you. If there was no you, there wouldn't be that much consideration of other, because there would be no other. It's like when Ramana says, yeah, there's no others. When people go, well, how do I help others? He says, there are no others. That's the point. Yeah. It's like, see that the self-centeredness is not you. This is the whole point of the thing. There's a root of our problem. Essentially, there's a mental system which is seeing through its self-centered lens. Yeah. It is never not going to see that way. It's always going to see that way. That's called the sense of individuality. There's not inherently a problem with it. It's how we survive in this world and the environment. However, if we're living only from a self-centered point of view, then we're seemingly always bound in discomfort, because there's always a sense of me in opposition to the other, let's say. That's why Ramana says there are no others, because you don't see from the sense of self-centeredness, there are no others. Yeah? There's a one thing happening, essentially, in the open space. So that paragraph to me highlights all of Advaita, driven by 100 forms of fear which come from the mental system, and all start with the phrase I. I'm scared of not having money. I'm scared of not having this. I'm scared of this. I'm scared of that. Self-delusion. Don't even have to explain that one, because we all can attest to self-delusion. Self-seeking, which would be I need to get, yeah, and usually I need to get under the under the I need to get at the cost of you, essentially. That's most of things, yeah. The air show in Toronto is a good example of this. I was saying this to Claire, and she's tired of hearing my voice, but I was saying, who who benefits from, like, what is that? It's a very weird, like, I never met anyone who was like, I was an alcoholic and then I went to the air show and I felt better. And I never also met anyone who was like, I'm in charge of booking the air show. Like, I don't know what that's for, but there's obviously a sense of extreme self-seeking somewhere that keeps it going because most people that I talk to want that thing gone. Yeah. So that's like self-seeking can be really funny, like I really need to eat sugar, or it can be super catastrophic, like people self-seeking under their delusion of their own opinions that are right no matter what. Like I'm going to end Medicaid for 12 million people, or I'm going to do this. This would all be based on self-seeking, yes? Mm. And then the real killer, at least in my experience, self-pity, which is that's a smasher for people with depression. Self-pity. So the head begins to pity itself, essentially, which comes with tons of comparison of better than or less than. And usually it has me in the position of being way less than. These are all based on self-centeredness, on one idea of self-centeredness, yeah? Now, the big misunderstanding I feel of most spiritual movements is that self is going to become not centered, but self is centered, yeah? The view of Advaita is you are not self. So there's a mental movement happening which is centered and focused on itself, and you are not that movement. Yeah. Now that needs to be investigated because that movement has 100 forms of fear, which will try to derail that investigation at any cost because it feels, because it's self-centered, that if you see you're not it, it's gonna something crazy is gonna happen. Yeah. This would be one of the forms of fear. So this really highlights, and then it also highlights more the AA point of view is that we've done things to other people, obviously, either drunk or not drunk, but everybody can attest to that. It says, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, we step on the toes of others and they retaliate, seemingly without provocation. Seemingly would mean true to us. Yeah? It seems to be true to me. Seemingly they're doing this to me. Now, sometimes in life, obviously, that happens, but most of the time, as an adult, there are repercussions to actions which might not be immediate, but seemingly they are stepping on our toes without provocation. But we invariably find that at some time in the past, we have made decisions based on self, based on self-centeredness, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. That is essentially the outcome of the world right now. There have been decisions which have been made, yes, which have placed us as a world in a position to be hurt. So you can see it in a huge form or you can see it in your own individual form. The thing about this book and this program is there's a it's kind of like music in a way where it's like violently honest. Yeah. So if you're not in the program, it can seem like, Jesus, this is a lot. It's like coming at me pretty heavy. Yeah. When you're in the program for a while, honesty is like, it's great because failure is what we're talking about for the most part. Yeah. So to see why or how we failed is like of great importance. And to me, self-centeredness is the glaring light. There's a system which is self-centered, which is talking to you as you. You are not that system. And it shows up in 100 forms of fear, self-pity, self-delusion, everything else. Yeah. We could sit with that paragraph forever, pretty much. You could write a PhD on that paragraph. But to keep it very simple, self-centeredness is what is moving us into discomfort. Yeah. Seemingly it's other people and other situations, but those are all based on the sense of me. being in those situations. And usually when it comes to one-on-one, I did something to provoke those, whether it was years ago or not. Decisions based on self. Hmm. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out because I feel like that is essentially the basis. There's a system which is thinking about itself constantly. You are not that system. And it seems, from a logical point of view, that that system would be looking out for that body. But it doesn't seem to be that way, at least in my experience. Yeah. That mental system of self-centeredness wanted to kill this body for years. So it's like I'm looking out for myself. That is not my experience. The head is not, it's looking out for itself. It's not even looking out for the body in a weird way. It's just feeding its own beliefs. Yeah? And it's tying me to those with this idea of me or I, which is another one of its beliefs. Yeah? So the bondage of self in AA would be there is no bondage. There's some kind of adhesive. That adhesive is the feeling, the sense, the word, the idea, me. Yeah? So without the me, everything is moving around. With the me, I am bound to that self-centeredness. Hmm. So the exploration of Advaita, let's say, or the investigation is really into the me. It's into the idea of self, which seems to be very centered on itself. And that can get very uncomfortable, quite violent, pretty quickly. Yeah. So that's on 62 of this book. Yeah. And then it goes on. The AA program points the alcoholic constantly back to that sense of self-centeredness. And Advaita does the same thing. Who is this arising to? Me. Yeah. The next paragraph starts with, so our troubles we think are basically of our own making, which is a very glaring point back again at your ideas. Yeah. And from the Buddhist sense, it's quite beautiful because nothing has any meaning. Something is giving all of this meaning. And it's giving it that meaning from the sense of self-centeredness. So when your head says something is shit, there's a sense that you are saying something is shit. Yeah. And it's not shit, but the head is painting it as shit. And now it's got you in an uncomfortable situation against that thing. It's very, it's illuminating, that paragraph. Is there any questions or anything about that? The beauty about a lot of this stuff is it's very disarming because you see that when your head tries to make a move, that's more self-centeredness. Yeah, it's just like you can see the head like fighting essentially ideas. And then you can see, wow, that's seeing that from its own perspective. And there you go. You're seeing it happen, yeah? So that kind of steps back and regresses more and more in a beautiful way. It's like it comes back to core beliefs. Like, I hate this thing, or I hate this job, let's say, for instance. And then you look at it through that lens, and it's like, well, there's something that seems to label that job as shitty, and it doesn't seem to be me, according to this book and all of Advaita. So that means that the hate for that job would affect you a lot less, or the hate for a relationship, or whatever. Yeah? These are just examples. But it all comes from that sense of self-centeredness. When the head is talking, it's talking as you. And that is would be a misidentification as far as this stuff is concerned. So a lot of times it just ends like disarms a bunch of movement. Yeah. And you're the one who benefits from that because you're not the mind or the body. So there's a big benefit when your head stops labeling everything, or it keeps labeling everything, but you see it's not you, so you don't arm it in a way. There's a lot of benefit to that because there's just a lot less going on. Like there's not really that much going on right here where we sit. And then as a mental idea or story, there's seemingly so much going on. But as I sit right here on this floor, there's nothing really going on. And then there's a mental system talking, which says it's my mental system, and that has all kinds of shit going on. But none of that's actually happening right here where I am. So that would be self-centeredness. And all that shit going on is only affecting me seemingly because the me. Yeah? That's amazing in a way. Hmm. Yeah, so if there's anything anybody wants to share or something, please feel free. It's very nice. There's only one thing to look at. It's like when you go into AA, they say there's only one thing to change, and that would be everything. Huh? That's what they say that a lot in AA. You only have to change one thing. It's just everything about yourself. Yeah, but it's really just a loss of faith. So when step one is powerlessness. Self thinks that your head thinks it has power over a bunch of shit it doesn't have power over. And when it takes that power or tries to, your life becomes unmanageable. That's it, really. Yeah. Your head doesn't have that much power over circumstances. It thinks it does. And then when you go with it and try to invoke that power on circumstances, that usually does not work out. So that would be the unmanageability of life. And then right at step two, essentially, they're just like, so that's not going to work. So we're just going to take the faith away from self and put it into something else. Advaita is doing the same thing through negation. Whatever pops up in your experience is not you, essentially.